The Sterling's crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across white tablecloths, each place setting worth more than Garrett
What
Mitchell
looks good to
earned
you on
in
the
a
menu
day.
today?
He tugged at the collar
maybe
of his
the
borrowed
pasta?
navy dress shirt, his brother's, 2 years out of style and half a size too small. Beside him, Harper sat rigid in her best Sunday dress, 7 years old and wide-eyed, taking in the gilded mirrors and the hushed murmur of wealth. "Daddy, are there famous people here?" "Just contractors and executives, sweetheart. We'll eat quick and go home." A waiter glided past, his gaze sliding over them with the practiced dismissal of someone who knew exactly who belonged and who didn't. Garrett caught the exchange between two servers near the kitchen. A glance, a barely perceptible headshake. These two don't fit. 16 years of construction work had taught him to read a room's structural integrity in seconds. This room's social architecture was already rejecting them. The main doors swept open. Conversations stuttered, heads turned. Victoria Brennan entered in a black tailored suit that could have paid Garrett's mortgage for 3 months, her blonde hair pulled back severe and perfect, radiating the kind of authority that made junior executives straighten their spines. Her face belonged on the covers of business magazines, and frequently was. Brennan Properties had reshaped the city's skyline in 5 years, turning abandoned industrial blocks into glass towers that caught the sunset like trophies. She scanned the room, her expression unreadable. 3 separate clusters of executives raised their hands in greeting. She ignored them all. Her heels clicked a straight line across the marble floor, past the senior vice presidents, past the architects, past the money. Straight to Garrett's corner table. He stood on instinct, his chair scraping too loud. "Ms. Brennan, She stopped 18 inches from him, close enough that he could see flecks of green in her gray eyes, close enough that the entire restaurant could see them. Her voice carried clear and level, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. "I don't have a husband. May I date you?" The room didn't just go quiet. It froze. A wine glass suspended halfway to someone's lips. A server's hand paused mid-pour. 50 pairs of eyes swiveled toward their table, and Garrett felt the weight of every stare like a physical pressure against his ribs. His face burned. This is a joke. Hidden cameras, some kind of corporate prank. Harper's voice, bright and guileless, shattered the silence. "Daddy doesn't have a wife anymore, miss." "Harper, quiet." The words came out strangled. He forced himself to meet Victoria's gaze. "Ms. Brennan, please don't. I'm just a construction foreman trying to raise my daughter. This isn't... I'm not..." Victoria pulled out the chair across from him and sat, uninvited. Her expression didn't shift, but something in her eyes softened fractionally. "I'm not joking, Mr. Mitchell. I've spent 15 years listening to people tell me exactly what they think I want to hear. I'm exhausted by the performance. You looked at your daughter like she was the only person in this room. That's the first genuine thing I've seen in months. You don't even know my name." Garrett Mitchell, 16 years in construction. Laid foreman on the Riverside Tower project. Widower, 2 years. Daughter Harper, age 7. You split your bread roll in half and gave her the larger piece before ordering anything. That's what made me notice. A phone camera flash went off somewhere near the bar. Then another. Garrett's stomach dropped. By tomorrow morning, this would be everywhere. Harper tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, is the pretty lady staying?" Before he could answer, Victoria smiled. Genuinely smiled, not the camera-ready version from magazine covers, and said, "Only if your daddy says yes." The construction site smelled like diesel and concrete dust, familiar as breathing. Garrett arrived at 6:00 a.m. sharp, the way he had for 16 years, but his phone had already logged 47 missed calls. The forklift operators were clustered near the job trailer, hunched over someone's phone, voices carrying across the skeletal frame of Riverside Tower's fourth floor. Russell Hayes, the site supervisor, intercepted him before he reached the tool shed. Russell was 53, weathered like old leather, with the kind of permanent tan that came from 3 decades under open sky. He shoved his phone at Garrett without preamble. "You're famous, Mitchell." The TikTok video had 380,000 views. The caption read, "When Cinderella is the prince, and our CEO love. Asked class difference. Shook us." The footage was grainy but clear. Victoria standing at his table, the question hanging in the air, the entire restaurant frozen in disbelief. The comments section was a war zone of hot takes and speculation. Derek Sullivan emerged from behind a pallet of rebar, beer gut straining against his high-vis vest, his grin sharp and mean. Derek had been a welder for 20 years, bitter about every promotion he'd been passed over for, and he'd found his opening. "Hey, Mitchell, should we start calling you Mr. Executive, or you gonna be Mr. Brennan after the wedding?" His voice carried deliberately, loud enough for the crew to hear. "Guess we know how to get ahead now, boys. Forget working hard. Just find yourself a rich lady with low standards." The other workers shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. Nobody laughed, but nobody defended him either. Garrett kept his voice level, his hands loose at his sides. "That's personal business, Derek. Doesn't concern the job." "Personal? You made it public when you let her ask you out in front of cameras. And now we all gotta wonder, is our foreman here because he knows concrete, or because he's got connections upstairs?" The implication hung heavy as the humidity. 16 years of proving himself with every pour, every inspection, every foundation that held firm through winter freeze and summer heat, all of it suddenly questionable because a woman with money had looked at him twice. Russell stepped between them. "Sullivan, you got rebar to cut. Mitchell, my office." The job trailer was cramped and cluttered with blueprints, coffee-stained and marked with structural notes in Russell's blocky handwriting. He didn't sit, just leaned against his desk and crossed his arms. "Mitchell, I've known you since you were an apprentice. You're the best foundation man I've worked with, but if this, whatever this is with Brennan, starts affecting the crew's respect for your calls, we got a problem." "It won't." "You sure?" "Because Derek's not wrong about optics. You understand what it looks like when the CEO of our client company singles out one foreman at a public event?" Garrett understood perfectly. He'd been navigating the politics of construction sites since he was 22, learning when to push back and when to keep his head down, how to earn respect from men who measured competence in calluses and straight pores. One viral video had undermined all of it. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know. But you gotta decide. Prove this doesn't change your work, or—" Russell let the sentence die. But the alternative was clear. There were 100 experienced foremen who'd take Garrett's spot without baggage. That evening, after Harper was asleep, Garrett sat on his apartment's narrow balcony overlooking the parking lot, the business card turning between his fingers. Victoria Brennan's name embossed in silver, a phone number handwritten on the back in elegant script. He'd memorized the number 2 days ago, but hadn't called. The rational part of his brain cataloged all the reasons why this was impossible: the class divide, the public scrutiny, the inevitable failure when she realized he couldn't fit into her world. The irrational part remembered how she'd looked at Harper without condescension, how her smile had transformed her face from magazine cover perfect to genuinely warm. His phone buzzed, a text from Clayton Reeves, Rachel's father. "Saw the video, you doing okay?" Garrett typed back, "Don't know yet." The response came fast. "Rachel wouldn't want you alone forever. Think about it." He deleted the drafted reply 3 times before settling on silence. Clayton meant well, but the old man didn't understand the weight of comparison. The ghost of a perfect marriage that made any new possibility feel like betrayal. Another text, this time from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Victoria. I'm sorry if I made things difficult for you. That wasn't my intention. If you'd rather I leave you alone, I'll understand. Garrett stared at the screen. The safe choice was silence. The smart choice was probably silence too, but Harper's voice echoed in his head from earlier that evening when she'd asked why the pretty lady had left so fast, if she'd done something wrong. And beneath that, older and fainter, Rachel's voice from the hospital. Don't live alone forever. Promise me. His thumbs moved before his brain could override them. Coffee. Riverside Park, Saturday 10 a.m. Just talking. No cameras. The reply arrived within seconds. I'll be there. Thank you for giving me a chance. Victoria Brennan's corner office occupied the entire northeast side of the 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city she'd helped rebuild. She stood at the glass now, watching morning traffic crawl along the interstate, trying to remember when commanding a boardroom had stopped feeling like victory and started feeling like a cage. The quarterly meeting started precisely at 8 o'clock a.m. 8 board members, 200 collective years of business experience, and Evelyn Whitmore at the head of the opposition. Evelyn was 52, silver-haired and sharp-featured, representing old money that had been with Brennan Properties since Victoria's father founded the company. She waited exactly 4 minutes into the meeting before striking. Victoria, dear, that was quite the viral moment. CEO seeks romance in 5-star restaurant. Very grassroots. Her tone could have frosted windows. Victoria kept her expression neutral, her hands folded on the mahogany table. My personal life doesn't affect our Q3 projections, Evelyn. We hit 124% of target. Riverfront is ahead of schedule. Those are the metrics that matter. Perhaps, but our investors care about perception as much as performance. Sterling Capital called me yesterday. They're concerned about judgment. Malcolm Sterling himself hadn't called. That much was obvious from Evelyn's phrasing. But the implication landed regardless. Victoria had spent 5 years cultivating Sterling's trust, turning his initial skepticism about a woman CEO into grudging respect, then partnership. One public moment and that foundation cracked. Noted, Victoria said, her voice giving nothing. Anything else? The meeting continued through the usual territory: development timelines, zoning challenges, contractor negotiations. Victoria participated with mechanical precision, her mind half present, the other half replaying Garrett's expression when she'd sat down uninvited. Not fear exactly, wariness. The look of someone who'd learned that good things came with hidden costs. After the board dispersed, Jennifer knocked tentatively on her office door. Her assistant was 25, fresh from business school, still idealistic enough to believe in work-life balance. Ms. Brennan, did he call back? Victoria checked her phone for the 20th time that hour. No. Maybe you overwhelmed him? I mean, that was pretty intense. I think I made the stupidest decision of my career. Jennifer hesitated at the door. Or maybe the bravest. Alone again, Victoria sank into her chair and pulled up the video on her phone. Watched herself approach that corner table, voice steady and clear, asking a question she hadn't planned until the words were already out. The comments section was predictably toxic, half calling it a publicity stunt, the other half dissecting what a rich bitch could possibly want with a regular guy. Nobody seemed to consider that she might have been sincere. Her phone pinged with a calendar reminder. Dinner with Marcus Ashford, 7 p.m. Marcus, the corporate attorney her mother had been pushing for months, came from the right family, attended the right schools, said the right things at the right parties. Their 3 dates had been pleasant and utterly hollow, like eating food with all the flavor chemically removed. He'd be perfect for her life. He'd bore her to death. She canceled the dinner. An hour before close of business, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. The message was brief. Coffee. Riverside Park, Saturday 10 a.m. Just talking, no cameras. Victoria's response was typed and sent before she could second-guess it. I'll be there. Thank you for giving me a chance. She sat back, pulse elevated for the first time in months for reasons that had nothing to do with acquisition deals or zoning battles. Through her office window, the city glittered in the setting sun. All the buildings she'd helped raise, monuments to ambition and careful planning. None of them had ever made her heart race like a 3-line text message. Riverside Park occupied 12 acres of reclaimed industrial land, transformed 15 years ago from abandoned rail yards into walking paths and playgrounds, pocket gardens and a duck pond where families threw stale bread on Sunday afternoons. Garrett arrived 20 minutes early, letting Harper burn off energy on the swing set while he claimed a bench with clear sightlines to all approaches. The October morning carried the first real chill of autumn, leaves beginning their slow turn from green to gold. He'd stopped at Joe's Coffee, the local shop 3 blocks from his apartment, picking up 2 mediums instead of the Starbucks that flanked the park's north entrance. A small thing, but it felt important, keeping this meeting on his terms, his territory, nothing fancy or aspirational. Harper rocketed back from the swings, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, is the pretty lady coming?" "Maybe. We'll see." I liked her. She didn't talk to me like I was dumb. That observation carried more weight than his daughter realized. Rachel had possessed the same quality, the ability to meet people exactly where they were, without condescension or performance. Garrett had watched Victoria's face when Harper spilled her juice at the restaurant, seen genuine concern rather than irritation about the stained designer blouse. Small moments revealed character more than grand gestures ever could. Victoria appeared at 9:58, punctual to the point of deliberate. She wore jeans, actual jeans, not the designer approximation rich people wore to look relatable, and a gray sweater, white sneakers that showed real wear. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of being pulled back in that severe boardroom style. Without the armor of tailoring and makeup, she looked younger, more uncertain. Garrett stood, offering one of the coffees. "Wasn't sure how you take it. Black, but there's cream and sugar if you need." "Black's perfect." She took the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you for agreeing to this. I know the restaurant thing was a lot." Understatement. They sat, 18 inches of weathered bench between them, both facing the playground where Harper had returned to the swings. Silence stretched, not quite awkward, but weighted with everything unsaid. Victoria broke first. "I owe you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything." "I do, actually. I put you in a difficult position without asking permission. That was selfish." She paused, searching for words. "The honest answer is I don't know exactly why I did it. I've been to 100 events like that restaurant dinner. Same faces, same conversations, everyone performing their version of success. And then I saw you with your daughter, and you were just real, splitting your bread, making sure she felt comfortable. No performance, no angle, just a father taking care of his kid." Garrett watched Harper pump her legs on the swing, building momentum. "That's not some special virtue. That's basic parenting." "Maybe, but it's rare in my world." Victoria's voice carried an edge of something, not bitterness, but a weariness that resonated bone deep. "Most men I meet want something. Access to my business contacts. A trophy wife for their ambitions. Someone they can show off at fundraisers. Nobody wants Victoria. They want the CEO, the company, the connections. After a while you forget there's supposed to be a difference." The confession landed between them like a stone thrown into still water, ripples spreading. Garrett understood that particular loneliness, the way people had treated him differently after Rachel died, like his grief made him fragile or tragic. Something to handle with care rather than honesty. Eventually he'd stopped trying to connect, poured everything into raising Harper and surviving one day at a time. "I get it," he said quietly. After my wife passed, everyone wanted to help. Meals, babysitting offers, the whole grief support routine. But nobody wanted to just be normal. Like Rachel dying made me a different person who needed careful handling. After a while, I stopped accepting help. Easier to be alone than be someone's project. Victoria's eyes found his. How long ago? 2 years. Car accident. She was driving home from her sister's place. Some drunk kid ran a red light, dead before the ambulance arrived. The facts came out practiced, polished smooth by repetition. The raw edge had dulled with time, though it never quite disappeared. I'm sorry. Me too. But Harper's the reason I get up. She doesn't let me stay stuck. Harper chose that moment to sprint back from the swings, orange juice box in hand, moving too fast and tripping over her own feet. The juice exploded across Victoria's gray sweater in a spectacular arc of artificial orange. Harper froze, horror-struck, tears welling immediately. Garrett lunged forward. Harper, careful! Victoria was already kneeling, eye level with his daughter, her voice gentle. Hey, it's okay. It's just a sweater. Sweaters wash. You're way more important than clothes. She used a napkin to clean Harper's hands first, then dabbed ineffectually at the growing stain across her own chest. See? No harm done. Harper's tears spilled over anyway. I ruined it. You added character. Now it has a story. Victoria smiled, and something in Garrett's chest loosened, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been holding. This woman, who probably paid more for that sweater than he spent on groceries in a month, was prioritizing his daughter's feelings over the stain. Not performance. Instinct. Harper crashed into Victoria's arms, hugging tight. Victoria's surprise flickered for half a heartbeat before she returned the embrace, one hand cupping the back of Harper's head. When their eyes met over his daughter's shoulder, Garrett saw something vulnerable there, something that looked almost like longing. They stayed at the park for 3 hours. Harper made friends with another girl and her golden retriever puppy. Victoria knew an animal shelter that needed junior volunteers, ways Harper could spend time with dogs without needing a yard. The conversation flowed easier than expected, threading through work and childhood memories, favorite books, and the strange solitude that came with being defined by a single role: parent, CEO, provider, figurehead. Victoria had grown up in wealth but emotional poverty, her father married to his company, her mother to social status. She'd learned early that affection was conditional, performance-based, always contingent on the next achievement. My dad died when I was 28, she said, watching the pond where ducks paddled in lazy circles. He'd built Brennan Properties from nothing, and everyone expected me to sell, take my inheritance, and live comfortably. Instead, I stayed, fought the board, restructured everything. 5 years later, we're triple the size. But you know what? He never saw me as capable. I spent his whole life trying to prove I was worthy of his attention, and he died before I could. Garrett heard the ache beneath the facts. You're still trying to prove it. Every single day. Exhausting, isn't it? Yeah, it is. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Harper eventually wore herself out and collapsed between them on the bench, half asleep. Victoria glanced at her phone, startled. It's been 3 hours. Doesn't feel like it. She met his eyes. Would you want to do this again? No pressure, just talking. Garrett thought about the construction site, Derek's sneering implications, Russell's warning about optics, thought about his apartment and the empty side of the bed he still couldn't bring himself to sleep on. Thought about Harper's face when she'd asked if the pretty lady was coming back. Yeah, I would. Victoria's smile transformed her face, erasing the careful CEO mask entirely. Saturday next week? Same time, same place? It's a date. The words hung between them, more weight than he'd intended. Not just coffee between acquaintances, something with possibility, something that scared and exhilarated in equal measure. Monday morning brought Derek Sullivan's grin back at full force, sharper and meaner than before. The crew had photographs now. Someone at the park had recognized Victoria despite the casual clothes, snapped pictures of them on the bench with Harper between them. The images had migrated to Facebook, Instagram, the whole social media ecosystem that fed on public figures behaving like regular humans. Derek cornered Garrett near the concrete mixer, voice pitched to Carrie. "Second date already, Mitchell. Moving fast, though I guess when you're dating the boss, regular rules don't apply." Garrett kept his hands steady, checking the slump test on the fresh concrete. 7 inches. Perfect consistency. "Victoria Brennan isn't my boss, Derek. She's CEO of the development company. I work for Hayes Construction. Different entities." Sure. And when she whispers in the right ears, gets you promoted over guys who've been here longer, worked harder, that'll be merit, right? Derek's smile could have cut steel. "Face it, Mitchell. You're fucking your way up. At least own it." The words landed like a gut punch, not because they were true, but because Garrett couldn't prove they weren't. His temper, carefully controlled for 16 years of job sites and union politics, finally slipped its leash. He dropped the testing rod, turned, and shoved Derek hard enough to send him stumbling back 3 steps. "Say that again." Derek recovered, face flushed, ready to escalate. "I said you're a—" Russell Hayes materialized between them, one hand on each chest, voice carrying the command of 3 decades in construction. "Enough! Both of you! My office! Now!" The job trailer felt smaller with 3 grown men packed inside. Russell planted himself behind his desk, arms crossed, face carved from granite. "Sullivan, you're suspended. 3 days, no pay. File your complaint with HR if you want, but you crossed a line." "Mitchell," Russell's gaze found Garrett. "You're lucky Derek's not pressing charges. But son, you gotta decide. Either this thing with Brennan affects your work and you're out, or you prove it doesn't. There's no middle ground." Garrett's jaw ached from clenching. "All I want is respect for the work I do." "Then earn it. With quality pours and good calls, not with your fists. You've been here 16 years. Don't let one relationship destroy what you built." That night, after Harper was asleep, Garrett sat on the balcony again, phone in hand, debating. The smart play was to text Victoria, explain that this wasn't going to work, that the complications outweighed whatever connection they'd found over coffee and spilled juice boxes. The safe play was walking away before anyone got hurt. His phone buzzed first. Victoria. "Heard about the incident at work. Are you okay?" The fact that she knew within hours meant she'd been following the situation. Probably had channels into Hayes Construction through business contacts. The surveillance should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like concern. Garrett typed, "Been better. This is getting complicated fast." Her response came immediately. "I know, I'm sorry, but Garrett, you don't need to protect me. I've faced worse in boardrooms. How about this? I handle my company, you handle your work. We don't let anyone pull us under. Deal?" He stared at that message, reading between the lines. She wasn't backing down, wasn't suggesting they slow down or hide. She was proposing they stand together and dare the world to have an opinion about it. Against every rational instinct screaming caution, Garrett typed, "Deal." Harper's elementary school science fair occupied the gymnasium on a Wednesday evening, 2 weeks after the park meeting. Garrett had helped her build a display on construction materials, concrete, steel, wood, complete with samples and hand-drawn diagrams of how buildings stayed upright. Harper took the project seriously, practicing her presentation until she could explain load-bearing walls and foundation depth without stumbling. Victoria had asked carefully if she could attend. Garrett had hesitated, weighing the optics against Harper's obvious excitement about showing the pretty lady her work. In the end, his daughter's happiness won. Clayton Reeves arrived first, filling the doorway with his broad-shouldered presence. his weathered face neutral but assessing. He'd been a union welder for 30 years, built like old rebar, tough, practical, unyielding. Since Rachel's death, he'd remained Harper's grandfather, showing up for every milestone, never pushing but always present. Garrett met him at the entrance. "Thanks for coming, Clayton. Wouldn't miss it." Harper worked hard. Clayton's gaze shifted over Garrett's shoulder. "That her?" Victoria approached in slacks and a simple blouse, dressed down but still polished, the kind of casual that came from money. She'd pulled her hair into a ponytail, wore minimal makeup, trying to blend. It almost worked. Garrett made introductions, feeling the weight of the moment. "Clayton, this is Victoria Brennan. Victoria, Clayton Reeves, Rachel's father." Clayton's handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. "Heard about you. CEO, right?" Victoria met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir." "So what exactly do you want with Garrett? A project, some kind of social experiment, or you slumming for kicks?" The directness could have been hostile, but Clayton's tone carried more curiosity than judgment. Testing, protecting his family the only way he knew how. Victoria didn't retreat an inch. "Mr. Reeves, I don't need a project. I have 15 of those at work. I'm here because Garrett looked at me like a human being instead of a balance sheet. That's rare enough to be worth pursuing. I respect you for protecting your family, but I have no intention of hurting anyone, especially Harper." The silence stretched 5 heartbeats. Clayton's weathered face shifted fractionally, something in his eyes softening. "Fair enough." Harper's display occupied a corner near the basketball hoop, her handmade posters explaining concrete mixtures and steel tensile strength with the earnest precision of a 7-year-old who'd absorbed her father's lectures. She spotted them approaching and lit up like a spotlight, bouncing on her toes. "Grandpa! Daddy! Ms. Victoria! You all came!" Victoria knelt to Harper's eye level, examining the samples with genuine interest. "Is this actual rebar?" "Daddy cut it special for me, and this is concrete. I helped pour it into the mold." "That's impressive. What did you learn about concrete?" Harper launched into her explanation, using technical terms. Aggregate, Portland cement, curing time, that she'd picked up from hanging around construction sites since she could walk. Victoria asked follow-up questions about durability and sustainability that showed she wasn't just being polite. She actually knew material science, understood the engineering beneath the architecture she commissioned. Clayton watched the exchange, his expression gradually shifting from assessment to something approaching approval. He pulled Garrett aside while Victoria and Harper discussed the properties of different steel grades. "She's smart, not putting on a show." "I know. Rachel told me something before she passed." Clayton's voice dropped, rough with old grief. She said, "Daddy, don't let Garrett live alone forever. He needs someone to love, and Harper needs a mother. Your wife knew she was dying. She wanted you happy." Garrett's throat closed. "She said that?" "Made me promise I'd support you if you found someone good. Victoria, she's not Rachel. Nobody could be. But from what I'm seeing, she might be worth the risk." Clayton's hand landed heavy on Garrett's shoulder. "Rachel loved you enough to let go. Maybe it's time you did the same." The words hit like a sledgehammer to old foundations, cracking open carefully sealed compartments where Garrett had stored his grief and guilt. The idea that moving forward might honor Rachel instead of betraying her, it was a perspective he hadn't let himself consider. Harper's name got called for the judging round. She presented with confidence, fielding questions from teachers and parent volunteers who seemed genuinely impressed by her grasp of construction principles. When the awards were announced, she took second place in her grade, clutching the ribbon like treasure. During her thank you speech, Harper's voice rang clear across the gymnasium. "I want to thank 3 people. Daddy for teaching me Grandpa Clayton for believing in me, and Ms. Victoria for showing me that Daddy's work is amazing." The scattered applause couldn't disguise the fact that all three adults were crying. Clayton swiped roughly at his eyes. Victoria didn't bother hiding her tears. Garrett felt something fundamental shift in his chest, a door he'd bolted shut 2 years ago, finally creaking open. After the fair, Clayton shook Victoria's hand, a gesture of acceptance that spoke volumes in body language Garrett had learned to read. Harper chattered the whole drive home about her ribbon and whether she could do a project on bridges next year. Victoria followed in her own car, meeting them at Garrett's apartment complex. She stood awkward in the parking lot, backlit by street lamps, uncertainty written across her features. "I should probably go. Let you two celebrate." Harper grabbed her hand. "Don't you want to see my room? I have all my drawings." Victoria's eyes found Garrett's, asking permission. He nodded, unable to articulate the tangle of feelings, hope and fear, and something warm unfurling beneath his ribs. His apartment was small, clean, but worn, furniture from thrift stores and family hand-me-downs. Nothing matched. Everything was functional. Victoria didn't comment on the contrast to her penthouse. She followed Harper to the second bedroom, admiring crayon drawings of buildings and excavators, a shelf of picture books and stuffed animals arranged with military precision. Harper showed off her collection with pride, narrating the story behind every drawing, every toy. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. Garrett watched from the doorway, seeing his daughter blossom under focused adult attention from someone who wasn't obligated by blood or duty to care. When Harper finally wound down, yawning mid-sentence, Garrett intervened. "Bedtime, princess. School tomorrow." Harper hugged Victoria without hesitation, fierce and trusting. "Will you come back?" Victoria's voice caught. "If your daddy says it's okay." "Please, Daddy." Garrett met Victoria's eyes over his daughter's head, seeing vulnerability there that matched his own. "Yeah, she can come back." After Harper was tucked in, Garrett walked Victoria to her car, a sleek sedan that cost more than he'd earned in 5 years. They stood in the pool of streetlight, autumn wind carrying the smell of distant wood smoke. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said, "for letting me be part of it. Thank you for caring. Harper doesn't open up to many people. She's special, like her dad." Victoria paused, choosing words carefully. "I know this is complicated, your work situation, the public attention, all of it, but Garrett, I haven't felt this alive in years. Just talking to you, being around Harper, it's like remembering I'm human instead of just a title." Garrett understood exactly what she meant. The past 2 weeks had woken something he'd thought died with Rachel, the possibility of connection, of building something new without erasing what came before. Terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Same here. Doesn't make it less scary." "No, but maybe scary is better than numb." She reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined, calloused palms against smooth skin. The physical manifestation of everything different and somehow compatible between them. No kiss, no dramatic gesture. Just hands clasped under a streetlight while the world kept spinning. "Saturday," Garrett said. "Same park, same time." Victoria smiled. "It's a date." This time neither of them flinched from the word. 6 weeks transformed routine into ritual. Saturday mornings belonged to Riverside Park, where Harper conquered progressively higher monkey bars while Garrett and Victoria occupied their bench, conversations deepening from surface biography into the messy architecture of actual lives. Sunday afternoons meant Harper's soccer games, Victoria cheering from aluminum bleachers beside parents who'd initially stared but eventually accepted her presence as fact rather than spectacle. Weeknight dinners rotated between Garrett's apartment, spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing fancy, and quiet restaurants where they could talk without performance. The media attention cooled from wildfire to embers. A celebrity divorce claimed the gossip cycle. Business journals moved on to merger speculation. Garrett's crew at the construction site settled into wary acceptance, Derek Sullivan serving his suspension and returning subdued, his hostility muted if not erased. Russell Hayes watched everything with the careful assessment of someone managing liability, but the quality of Garrett's work remained flawless. Every pour on spec, every inspection passed clean. Victoria integrated herself into their lives with deliberate care, never pushing, always asking permission. She brought books Harper mentioned wanting but never expensive gifts that would highlight the wealth gap. She learned Harper's bedtime routine, the specific way she liked her sandwich cut, which stuffed animals held emotional significance. Small details that demonstrated attention rather than obligation. Harper bloomed under the attention, her initial wariness transforming into genuine affection. She started calling Victoria by first name without the Ms. prefix, a casualness that signaled acceptance. When she scraped her knee at the playground, she ran to Victoria first, instinct overriding thought. Victoria's face when she cleaned the wound and applied the bandage, that particular blend of tenderness and protective fierceness, told Garrett everything about how deeply she'd already invested. But the corporate world Victoria inhabited followed different physics than Saturday morning parks. Brennan Properties Board convened monthly, and Evelyn Whitmore had been stockpiling ammunition. The November meeting started precisely at 8, conference room stark and modern, city sprawling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. 8 board members, collective net worth exceeding $2 billion, and Evelyn Whitmore positioned at Malcolm Sterling's right hand. Sterling himself represented 30% of company capital, old railroad money transmuted through generations into real estate empire. He was 67, silver-haired, possessed of the casual arrogance that came from never once doubting his right to power. Evelyn opened her offensive 12 minutes into routine quarterly review, her voice silk over razors. Before we proceed, I'd like to address the elephant we've been politely ignoring. Victoria's relationship has generated significant attention. Sterling Capital received inquiries from 3 separate investors regarding leadership focus. Victoria kept her expression neutral, hands folded on imported mahogany. My personal life hasn't impacted company performance. Q3 exceeded projections by 27%. Riverfront development is completing 2 weeks early and 8% under budget. West Ridge contracts closed at $45 million. The metrics speak clearly. Performance isn't the concern. Malcolm Sterling's voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to deference. Perception is. Our investors are conservative. They expect certain standards of conduct from executive leadership. Bradley Walsh, the CFO, leaned forward. Bradley was 42, Harvard MBA, corporate politician to his marrow. With respect, Ms. Brennan's private associations shouldn't factor into business decisions. Evelyn's smile could have cut glass. When those associations dominate social media and business press coverage, they become public concern. We're not questioning Victoria's competence. We're questioning judgment. The coded language wasn't subtle. Judgment meant dating below her station. Associations meant Garrett specifically. Standards of conduct meant staying within approved social boundaries where CEOs married other executives, not construction foremen. Victoria's pulse elevated, but her voice remained level. I appreciate the concern. However, I maintain clear boundaries between personal and professional spheres. Garrett Mitchell works for Hayes Construction, not Brennan Properties. We have no business relationship that could constitute conflict of interest. Yet Hayes Construction currently holds 3 contracts with us, worth combined $17 million. Evelyn produced a tablet displaying contract summaries with dates highlighted. All negotiated during or after your relationship became public. How do we assure stakeholders these weren't influenced by personal factors? The implication hung heavy, that Victoria had directed contracts toward Garrett's employer as favoritism, that business decisions had been compromised by emotion. Bradley Walsh looked uncomfortable. Two other board members shifted in their seats. Malcolm Sterling's expression revealed nothing. Victoria met Evelyn's gaze directly. Hayes Construction won those contracts through competitive bidding, evaluated by our procurement team without my input. Documentation is available for review. I've recused myself from any decisions involving Hayes to prevent even appearance of impropriety. My relationship with Mr. Mitchell doesn't affect how we do business. Perhaps not yet. Malcolm Sterling's interjection carried finality. But Victoria, you must understand the position this puts us in. I represent substantial capital. My partners expect stability, discretion, leadership that maintains appropriate image. This relationship, regardless of its personal merit, creates complications we'd prefer to avoid. The threat crystallized without being stated explicitly. Malcolm Sterling wielded enough influence to remove Victoria from leadership if he chose to mobilize other board members. Evelyn Whitmore clearly had his ear. The battle lines were drawn in conference room politeness and corporate euphemism. Victoria held Sterling's gaze 5 seconds before responding. I hear your concerns. I'll take them under advisement. Translation. She wouldn't be ending the relationship to satisfy boardroom politics, but she'd heard the warning shot clearly. The meeting continued through remaining agenda items with surface professionalism, but the real message had been delivered. After adjournment, Bradley Walsh caught Victoria in the hallway. That was a power play. Evelyn's been angling for your position since your father passed. She thinks you're vulnerable now. I am vulnerable. Sterling's support isn't guaranteed anymore. Because you're dating a construction worker? Bradley's tone carried genuine confusion. That's absurd reasoning. Welcome to old money politics. They care more about bloodlines than balance sheets. Victoria's phone buzzed. Garrett, probably checking how the meeting went. She ignored it for now, needing to compartmentalize before bringing this stress into their space. Back in her office, Victoria stood at the windows overlooking the city she'd helped rebuild, trying to separate frustration from strategy. Evelyn's attack had been calculated, targeting the relationship as leverage rather than genuine business concern. The question was whether Malcolm Sterling's discontent was real or manufactured by Whitmore's manipulation. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from Jennifer, her assistant. Mr. Sterling asked for private meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. The follow-up conversation would clarify whether this was warning or ultimatum. Garrett received the job offer via phone call during lunch break, sitting in his truck with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich Harper had helped pack that morning. Russell Hayes's voice carried through speaker, unusually formal. Mitchell, corporate wants to talk to you about a position. Project manager slot opened up for the West Ridge development. Garrett set down his sandwich, appetite vanishing. What's the catch? No catch. 25% raise, benefits upgrade, management experience that could lead to VP track. Russell paused. Downside is location. West Ridge is up in Riverside County, 3 hours north. Minimum 18 months on-site supervision. The numbers were impressive. Project manager represented the career jump Garrett had been angling toward for 5 years, the kind of advancement that would secure Harper's college fund, upgrade them from apartment to house with actual yard space. The salary increase alone would transform their financial stability from precarious to comfortable. The location was a nuclear bomb dropped directly into his relationship. When do they need an answer? Week, maybe less. They're interviewing 3 candidates, but you're the front runner based on your Riverside Tower Foundation work. Mitchell, this is the opportunity. You know that. Garrett did know. Construction careers advanced through increasingly complex projects, building reputation through visible success. Project manager was the gateway to senior leadership, the difference between hourly wages and salaried security. At 38, he was already older than most guys who made PM. This chance might not come again. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. They'll move on if you hesitate. After the call ended, Garrett sat motionless in his truck, watching the construction site through dusty windshield. 18 months. Harper would be 9 when he returned. 2 years of childhood he'd miss, except for weekend visits. She'd just started feeling secure again after losing her mother. Uprooting her now could undo all that stability. And Victoria. 6 weeks wasn't long by any conventional metric, but the connection felt deeper than timeline suggested. Moving 3 hours away would effectively end what they were building, reduce them to occasional weekend visits that would slowly peter out under pressure of distance and incompatibility of schedules. He could turn down the offer, stay in his current position, keep his life intact. But opportunities like this didn't appear twice. Saying no meant accepting he'd probably remain a foreman until retirement, watching younger guys leapfrog past him because they'd been willing to take risks. He wasn't. That evening, after Harper finished homework and settled into her room with a book, Garrett texted Victoria. "Need to talk. Can you come over?" She arrived 40 minutes later, still in work clothes but tension visible in the set of her shoulders. Something had happened at her meeting, too, though Garrett couldn't read specifics from her expression. They sat on his narrow couch, the apartment suddenly feeling smaller with both of them present. Garrett explained the job offer, watching her face for reaction. Victoria's expression cycled through surprise, understanding, then something that looked like resignation. "That's a huge opportunity." "Yeah, it is. 18 months is a long time. 3 hours means weekend visits at best. Realistically, this would end us." Victoria was quiet, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried careful control. "What would you do if Harper and I weren't factors? Just career-wise?" The question forced honesty. "I'd take it, no question. It's everything I've worked toward." "Then you should take it." "That simple?" "No, not simple at all." Victoria looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "But Garrett, I can't be the reason you don't advance your career. That would poison everything between us eventually. You'd resent me, maybe not today or next month, but eventually." Her logic was sound, which made it worse. Garrett had run the same calculations, arrived at similar conclusions, but hearing her say it out loud transformed abstract reasoning into concrete loss. "So, we just end this? Pretend the last 6 weeks didn't matter?" "They mattered. They matter more than almost anything in my life right now." Victoria's voice fractured slightly. "But maybe we're forcing this. Geography, careers, institutional resistance. We've been pretending feelings are enough. Maybe that was naive." Garrett wanted to argue, to insist they could make long-distance work, that 18 months wasn't forever. But he'd been through enough relationships, one perfect one that ended in tragedy, to recognize the difference between what was possible and what was probable. 3-hour separation with his schedule and hers, the added stress of proving himself in a new position, Harper's needs taking rightful priority over romance. The math didn't support success. "I haven't accepted the job yet." "But you will. You should." Victoria stood, collecting her purse with mechanical precision. "I should go. Let you think without pressure." "Victoria, wait. I had a board meeting today. They're threatening to pull major funding because of us. Malcolm Sterling controls 30% of company capital and he's concerned about my judgment. Evelyn Whitmore is using our relationship as leverage to undermine my position." The words spilled out faster, stress breaking through her composure. "So maybe this is the universe telling us we're forcing something that doesn't fit. You need your career. I need mine. Harper needs stability. None of that works with us together." The confession landed between them like shrapnel, both facing professional consequences, both watching their separate worlds reject the connection they'd found. The obstacles suddenly felt insurmountable, Not just distance, but institutional resistance, the grinding machinery of class structure reasserting itself. Garrett wanted to fight back, to declare love or commitment or some dramatic promise that would overcome logistics. But he'd only known her 6 weeks. Harper had to come first. His career stability mattered for his daughter's future. Victoria reached the door, hand on the knob, then turned back. For what it's worth, this was the best 6 weeks I've had in years. You made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just functional. I'll always be grateful for that. Victoria. She left before he could formulate response, the door clicking shut with terrible finality. Garrett sat on his couch, the apartment suddenly cavernous despite its actual dimensions, feeling like he'd just made the worst decision of his life without actually deciding anything. Harper emerged from her room 10 minutes later, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, face crumpled with concern. Why was Victoria crying? You heard that? I was reading, but the walls are thin. Harper climbed onto the couch beside him, fitting naturally under his arm. Is she not coming back? How did you explain adult complications to a 7-year-old? Garrett tried for honesty without overwhelming detail. Daddy got offered a really good job, but it's far away. We'd have to move for a while or I'd have to work there and only come home on weekends. Harper processed this, her small face serious beyond her years. And Victoria can't come? Her job is here. She runs a big company. She can't just leave. So you're picking the job instead of her. The blunt assessment cut deeper than sophisticated rationalization. When Harper reduced it to core elements, the choice looked cold. Garrett was prioritizing career advancement over relationship, functionality over connection. Exactly what Victoria's father had done, the wound that had shaped her entire life. It's more complicated than that, sweetheart. But you like her, I can tell, and she likes you, and me. Harper's voice carried the logic of childhood, uncomplicated by adult considerations. If you like each other, why doesn't that matter most? Garrett had no good answer, because it should matter most. Because 6 weeks felt like foundation for something permanent, because Harper had started healing in ways he'd thought impossible, because Victoria had shown him that moving forward didn't betray Rachel's memory. All of that should outweigh career advancement, but he had a daughter to raise and future to secure. Practical considerations couldn't be dismissed for romantic possibility. Sometimes grown-up decisions are hard, even when the feelings are clear. Harper snuggled closer, accepting what she couldn't change. I think you should call her. Tell her we'll figure it out. Maybe. Let me sleep on it. But sleep evaded him that night, mind churning through scenarios and calculations, trying to find equation that balanced all variables without sacrifice. By 3 a.m., he'd accepted that no such equation existed. Every choice meant loss. Victoria's meeting with Malcolm Sterling took place in his downtown office. Old money luxury with mahogany paneling and leather furniture that predated her birth. Sterling occupied his desk like a throne, silver hair perfect, expression neutral but eyes calculating. Thank you for coming, Victoria. I'll be direct. Your relationship with the construction worker is becoming problematic. Victoria had prepared for this, armor firmly in place. With respect, Mr. Sterling, my personal life shouldn't affect business relationships. Our performance metrics are exceptional. Performance isn't the issue. I've heard from 3 investors who are uncomfortable with the optics. They see a female CEO dating significantly below her station and question whether emotion is compromising business judgment. The coded sexism was hardly subtle. Male CEOs dated whoever they wanted without board intervention, but female leadership apparently required higher standards of conduct. Victoria bit back the feminist argument she wanted to make, forcing herself to strategic thinking instead. I've maintained complete separation between personal and professional spheres. Garrett's employer has no preferential treatment. I've recused myself from relevant decisions. Yet the perception exists. Perception affects stock price, investor confidence, our ability to secure future funding. Sterling leaned forward, dropping the veneer of diplomacy. I'm not asking you to be miserable, Victoria. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. End this relationship or face potential consequences for the company you've built. Your father would have understood priorities. The invocation of her dead father was calculated cruelty, pressing exactly the wound that never healed. Victoria had spent her entire life trying to prove herself worthy of his regard, fighting for recognition he'd never granted. Sterling knew that history weaponized it now. My father also believed in integrity. Not making business decisions based on who I date seems fairly integral to that value. Your father understood that leadership requires sacrifice. Personal desires come second to company welfare. Sterling's expression hardened fractionally. I control 30% of capital, Victoria. Evelyn Whitmore has been building coalition among other board members. If this becomes formal vote, you may not survive as CEO. Consider whether your relationship is worth destroying everything you've accomplished. The threat crystallized without ambiguity. Fall in line or face removal from the position she'd fought to earn, the company she'd transformed from her father's moderate success into major player in regional development. Sterling could make good on the threat if he mobilized enough board support. Victoria held his gaze, refusing to flinch. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Sterling. I'll give your concerns appropriate consideration. Translation. She'd heard the ultimatum but wasn't committing to compliance. The meeting concluded with surface civility masking absolute antagonism. Victoria returned to her own office, closed the door, and allowed herself 60 seconds of pure fury before rebuilding composure. She'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let boardroom politics dictate her personal life. But Sterling's leverage was real. Evelyn Whitmore's campaign was gaining traction. The company Victoria had poured herself into could be taken if she didn't capitulate. Her phone showed missed call from Garrett. She didn't return it, needing time to think without emotional complication. Jennifer knocked tentatively, entering with coffee Victoria hadn't requested but desperately needed. That looked intense. Sterling wants me to end my relationship or face potential removal as CEO. That's insane. Can he actually do that? With Evelyn's help, probably. She's been undermining me for months, using this as ammunition. Victoria sipped coffee that tasted like ash. The worst part is he's not entirely wrong. I've been distracted, missing meetings I'd normally never miss, leaving early for Harper's soccer games. Small things that add up to pattern of different priorities. You're allowed to have life outside work. Not according to old money rules. Female executives get judged differently. We're supposed to be twice as competent and completely dedicated. Personal lives are weakness. Jennifer's expression shifted to something like anger on Victoria's behalf. That's ridiculous. That's reality. Victoria set down the coffee, decision crystallizing with bitter clarity. Garrett got offered project manager position. 3 hours away, 18 months minimum. He hasn't accepted yet, but he will. He should. It's right move for his career. And you too? We end. He advances professionally. I keep my company. Everyone wins except us. The logic was impeccable. The emotional cost felt unsurvivable. That evening, Victoria drove to her penthouse and sat alone in 3,000 square feet of luxury that felt increasingly like expensive prison. She'd built this life deliberately. Every career move calculated, every relationship evaluated for strategic benefit. She'd become exactly what her father had been, all ambition and no heart, measuring success through acquisition rather than connection. Meeting Garrett had cracked that facade, reminded her what it felt like to be valued for something beyond net worth and business contacts. Harper's uncomplicated affection, Garrett's quiet integrity, Saturday mornings in the park where nobody cared about quarterly projections, all of it represented escape from the gilded cage she'd constructed. But the cage had bars she couldn't break without destroying everything she'd built. Sterling's threat was real. Evelyn's campaign was gaining momentum. If Victoria fought to keep both relationship and company, she'd likely lose both. Her phone buzzed with text from Garrett. "Can we talk? In person?" Victoria stared at the message, knowing that conversation would only make things harder. They'd already said what mattered. Drawing it out would just inflict additional pain. She typed, "I think we both know where this ends. You take the job. I keep my company. We tried and it mattered, but the world won't let us make it work. I'm sorry." His response came fast. "Don't decide alone. Let me come over." That won't change the math. Distance and careers and Harper's needs. It doesn't add up to sustainable future. Better to end clean than drag out inevitable. The cursor blinked on her phone, waiting for his reply. It took 5 full minutes to arrive. "This doesn't feel clean, but if that's what you want, I'll respect it." Victoria's vision blurred with tears she'd been holding since the Sterling meeting. What she wanted was for class boundaries to not matter, for geography to be irrelevant, for institutional resistance to evaporate. What she wanted was the fantasy of easy love instead of complicated reality. She typed, "Thank you for the best 6 weeks I've had in years. Take care of yourself and Harper." Then she turned off her phone and cried alone in her expensive penthouse, mourning something that had barely begun but felt like losing everything. Garrett accepted the project manager position 3 days later, professional necessity overriding personal devastation. Russell Hayes congratulated him with genuine warmth, recognizing career advancement as validation of skills honed through 16 years of careful work. The crew threw informal celebration at local bar, even Derek Sullivan offering grudging respect for the promotion. Harper took the news badly. She'd understood the abstract concept of Daddy's new job, but hadn't grasped what 18 months actually meant until Garrett explained he'd be gone weekdays, home only on weekends if logistics permitted. She cried herself to exhausted sleep that night, clutching her stuffed elephant, asking why Victoria couldn't come with them or why they couldn't stay. Garrett had no good answers. He packed their apartment into boxes, arranged for Harper to live with Clayton Reeves during the week, and come north on weekends when possible, tried to frame this as adventure rather than abandonment. His daughter's red-rimmed eyes accused him of choosing wrong, despite his careful explanations about financial security and career trajectory. 2 weeks before his start date, Clayton requested meeting at his house, modest ranch style in working-class neighborhood, walls covered with family photos spanning 3 generations. They sat in the kitchen over coffee, the old man's weathered hands wrapped around his mug. "You're making a mistake." Garrett had expected support, not challenge. "It's the right career move, Clayton. You know that." "Career, sure. Life. Different question." Clayton met his eyes with the directness of someone who'd lived too long for bullshit diplomacy. "Rachel told me something before she passed. Made me promise. She said if you found someone good, I should support it, not let you hide behind excuses." The invocation of Rachel felt like manipulation, which made it work. Garrett's defenses cracked. "Victoria and I were together 6 weeks. That's not enough foundation for life decisions. Your grandmother and I decided to marry after 5 weeks. That was 53 years ago. Time doesn't measure connection quality." Clayton leaned forward, voice intense. "Rachel loved you enough to want you happy after she was gone. She made me promise I wouldn't let you live alone forever. And here you are, running away from the first person who made you feel alive since she died." "I'm not running. I'm taking career opportunity that will secure Harper's future. You're hiding behind career because feelings are scary, because moving forward feels like betraying Rachel's memory. Clayton leaned back, crossing his arms. You still carrying that ring I gave you? Garrett nodded slowly. In my truck, been carrying it everywhere, but I keep waiting for the right moment. The right moment is when you stop being a coward. Clayton's voice softened. Rachel told me explicitly, when you find someone worth fighting for, make sure you fight. You found her, now fight. Garrett stared at his coffee. Victoria's world doesn't have space for me. Her board is threatening to remove her because of our relationship. My taking this job solves both problems, or creates bigger ones. You'll spend 18 months regretting what you didn't fight for. Harper will grow up watching her father choose work over love. And Victoria, she'll think she wasn't worth standing ground for. Clayton pushed the box closer. Sometimes the brave choice isn't the practical one. The ring box sat between them like landmine, representing possibility that terrified more than any risk to career or finances. Garrett had functioned on autopilot since Rachel died, making safe choices that prioritized survival over living. Victoria had disrupted that careful equilibrium, forced him to feel things he'd thought permanently buried. What if it doesn't work? What if we fight for this and it falls apart anyway? Then at least you'll know you tried. Better than spending rest of your life wondering. Garrett picked up the batikfim, opened it. The ring was simple. White gold band with modest diamond. Nothing ostentatious but clearly crafted with care. Rachel's grandmother had worn it 60 years. Rachel had wanted it passed forward, believing in continuity rather than eternal stasis. His phone sat silent on the table. Victoria hadn't called since their last conversation. She'd accepted his decision with grace that hurt worse than anger would have. Maybe she'd already moved on, decided corporate priorities outweighed relationship complications. Maybe the moment had passed, opportunity closed through their mutual cowardice disguised as pragmatism. Or maybe Clayton was right, and safe choices were killing them both. Garrett pulled out his phone, dialing before doubt could override instinct. The call rang 4 times before transferring to voicemail. Victoria's recorded voice, professional and remote. You've reached Victoria Brennan. Leave a message. It's me. I know we agreed this was over, but I can't stop thinking that we gave up too easy. Career and distance and all the practical reasons we listed. They're real obstacles, but not necessarily insurmountable ones. I think we owe it to ourselves to try harder before quitting. Call me back, please. He disconnected, staring at his phone like it might spontaneously generate response. Clayton watched with expression that mixed approval and concern. She might not call back. I know, but at least I'll have tried. 2 hours passed, then 4. Garrett's phone remained stubbornly silent. He fed Harper dinner, helped with homework, went through bedtime routine on autopilot while his mind replayed voicemail message, wondering if he'd said wrong thing or not enough, or simply called too late. At 10:47 p.m., as he was preparing to give up and sleep, his phone finally rang. Victoria's name on screen made his pulse spike. I got your message. Took you a while to respond. I've been sitting in my car outside your apartment for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I should come up or drive away. Her voice carried exhaustion and something else. Hope, maybe, or desperation that looked similar. Garrett, I want to fight for this, but I don't know how. Sterling's serious about removing me if I don't fall in line. You have career opportunity you can't pass up. Harper needs stability. How do we make those things compatible? I don't know either, but I think trying and failing is better than not trying at all. That's romantic, but not a plan. Then come up and we'll make a plan. Together. Long silence stretched between them. Then, "Okay, I'm coming up." Victoria stood in his doorway looking wrecked, makeup smudged, hair escaping its usual perfect arrangement, eyes red from crying or anger or both. She'd driven here directly from wherever she'd been hiding, bypassing her penthouse to crash back into his life with the same reckless honesty that had started everything 6 weeks ago. Garrett pulled her inside, closing the door against the world. They stood in his narrow entryway, both broken open and bleeding out, neither certain how to proceed but committed to trying. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Victoria's confession emerged raw and unpolished. "That terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. Every relationship I've had was transactional or strategic or some performance for cameras. This feels real, and that makes it dangerous. I'm already in love with you. Have been since you cleaned Harper's scraped knee and didn't care about your ruined sweater." Garrett's admission felt like exposure, vulnerability he'd sworn to never risk again. But Clayton said something tonight that keeps echoing. He said sometimes brave choices aren't practical ones. Your father-in-law is wise. He gave me Rachel's grandmother's ring, said she wanted it passed to whoever came next. Victoria's eyes widened. "Garrett? I'm not proposing, not yet, but I'm saying this matters enough to fight for. The job, Sterling's threats, geography, they're obstacles but not walls. We just need to find way through instead of surrendering." Victoria moved closer, close enough that he could see tear tracks on her cheeks, the vulnerability she kept hidden from boardrooms and business press. "What if we can't find way through? What if trying just makes the ending worse? Then at least we'll know we didn't quit when things got hard." She kissed him then, desperate and searching, the first real kiss they'd shared despite 6 weeks of growing intimacy. Garrett responded with equal intensity, pulling her tight against him, feeling her heart hammering against his chest. This was risk and terror and potential devastation, everything practical wisdom advised against. They broke apart, breathless. Victoria rested her forehead against his, eyes closed, voice barely whisper. "I have board meetings scheduled for next week. Sterling and Whitmore are planning formal challenge to my leadership. If I show up with plan to end our relationship, I keep my position. If I don't, they'll probably remove me. What do you want to do?" "Fight. Lose everything if necessary, but at least go down swinging." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with determination that had built her company. "I'm tired of letting other people dictate my life. Tired of performance and strategy and careful calculation. You make me want to be reckless." "Reckless looks good on you." They spent the next 3 hours at his kitchen table, mapping strategy with desperate creativity. Garrett could negotiate with project management to work 4 days instead of 5, accepting slightly lower salary in exchange for consistent weekend presence. Victoria could restructure company leadership, promoting Bradley Walsh to COO to handle daily operations while she focused on strategic vision, demonstrating that personal life wasn't compromising business function. Harper would stay with Clayton during weekdays but come north on weekends when feasible, maintaining family connection despite geographic challenges. The plan was fragile, built on optimistic assumptions and best-case scenarios. 18 months was still 18 months. Sterling's opposition wouldn't evaporate through wishful thinking. Distance and time and institutional resistance would grind against their relationship constantly. But it was plan, an attempt, something better than surrender. Victoria left at 2 a.m., driving back to her empty penthouse with purpose instead of despair. Garrett collapsed into bed exhausted and terrified and more alive than he'd felt since Rachel's death. Harper would ask questions in the morning. His start date was 12 days away. Sterling's board meeting loomed like an execution date. Everything remained impossible, but they were going to try anyway. The Riverside Tower project reached critical phase the following week, Foundation pour scheduled across 3 consecutive days requiring Garrett's complete attention. He worked 16-hour shifts, supervising concrete trucks and rebar placement, running compaction tests and monitoring cure rates with obsessive precision. This would be his last major project before transitioning to West Ridge, legacy work that would stand decades as testament to his craftsmanship. Derek Sullivan approached during lunch break on day 2, uncharacteristically serious. "Heard you worked things out with the CEO. Garrett assessed him warily, looking for trap. "We're trying. That takes guts. Most guys would have taken the safe play." Derek shifted weight, something like apology in his posture. "I gave you shit because I was jealous. You're good at what you do, and you landed something real with someone who matters to you. That's rare. I'm sorry for making it harder." The apology was unexpected enough to disarm Garrett's defensive instincts. "Appreciate that. For what it's worth, concrete doesn't lie. Your work's always been solid. If you got promoted, you earned it." Derek extended his hand. "No hard feelings?" They shook, tension that had poisoned months of job site interaction finally releasing. Small victory in week of impossible challenges, but Garrett took it as evidence that change was achievable if you pushed hard enough against resistance. Victoria's board meeting occurred Thursday afternoon. She'd texted that morning. "Going into battle, we'll report casualties later." Garrett couldn't focus on work, mind drifting to downtown conference room where Victoria faced institutional power determined to force compliance. She'd prepared presentation demonstrating company performance remained exceptional, that personal life hadn't compromised business judgment, that removing her would be reactionary decision rather than strategic necessity. But Sterling controlled substantial capital, and Evelyn Whitmore was skilled at corporate politics. The day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Concrete set according to physics regardless of human drama. Garrett ran tests, signed inspection documents, made decisions about rebar spacing while his phone sat silent in his pocket. At 4:17 p.m., Victoria called. Garrett stepped away from the site, heart hammering, prepared for defeat. "I still have my job. Barely." Relief flooded through him. "What happened?" "I gave them ultimatum instead of accepting theirs. Told Sterling and the board that if they wanted different CEO, I'd resign effective immediately. But they'd lose me, Bradley Walsh, and probably 3 other key executives who'd follow me out. Pointed out that leadership exodus would tank stock price worse than any relationship scandal." Victoria's laugh carried edge of hysteria. "It was bluff. Bradley didn't actually agree to resign beforehand, but Sterling believed it. He backed down." "You're incredible. I'm terrified. This bought time but didn't solve problem. Sterling will be watching for any excuse to push me out. I have to be perfect now, no mistakes, no distractions." "That's a lot of pressure." "It's the cost of choosing you over easy compliance. I'm not complaining, just acknowledging reality." Her voice softened. "Garrett, I don't regret it. Even if this ultimately fails, I won't regret fighting." "Neither will I." They talked another 10 minutes before work responsibilities forced disconnection. Garrett returned to the pour feeling lightness that had been absent for days. They hadn't won. Not really. The obstacles remained daunting. But they'd survived first major test without surrendering. That evening, Harper asked the question Garrett had been dreading. "When you go to the new job, will Victoria come visit us?" "Sometimes. Her work is here, so it'll be mostly me coming back on weekends." "But you'll still be together? She's not leaving?" "We're going to try really hard to make it work, but sweetheart, it's going to be difficult. I need you to understand that." Harper processed this with the seriousness she brought to complicated topics. "When Mom died, you said hard things are worth doing if they matter. Does Victoria matter?" The question cut through all adult rationalization to essential truth. "Yeah, she matters a lot." "Then we'll figure it out." Harper's certainty carried the absolute faith of childhood, uncompromised by experience that taught caution. "We're good at hard things." Garrett hugged his daughter, feeling tears press against his eyelids. 7 years old and already wiser than he deserved. Rachel would be proud of who Harper was becoming, resilient and loving and brave enough to risk caring despite loss. Garrett's final week at Riverside Tower blurred past in logistics and goodbyes. Russell Hayes organized farewell lunch at the Irish pub where crews gathered after major milestones, toasting Garrett's promotion with genuine warmth that erased months of tension. Derek Sullivan bought him beer. The Rebar crew presented gag gift, a hard hat labeled Big Shot PM, with affection beneath the teasing. Clayton helped him pack the apartment, sorting belongings into what would go north versus what stayed with Harper in her temporary setup. The old man worked with methodical efficiency, occasionally offering commentary disguised as instruction. "Victoria's coming up to help you get settled?" "Next weekend. She has board meeting this week that she can't miss." "Smart woman. She'll keep you honest." Clayton taped a box shut, then fixed Garrett with significant look. "You still have the ring?" "In my truck. Not sure when I'll use it, but I'm keeping it close." "Good. Don't wait too long. Life's shorter than you think." The drive north to West Ridge took 4 hours through increasingly rural landscape, familiar urban sprawl giving way to open country and small towns that serviced agricultural industry. The development site sat on former farmland, ambitious mixed-use project combining residential and commercial space, betting on population growth as housing costs pushed people further from city centers. Garrett's temporary housing was company-provided apartment near the site, 2-bedroom, furnished with generic corporate efficiency. He unpacked essentials, set up Harper's room for weekend visits, tried to ignore how empty everything felt without his daughter's chaos and Victoria's unexpected presence. Work consumed the first week. Meetings with engineering teams, reviewing plans and specifications, establishing site protocols. Project manager responsibilities were different from foreman work, more coordination than hands-on labor, navigating contractor politics and budget constraints. Garrett adapted quickly, leveraging his practical experience to identify potential problems before they manifested in expensive mistakes. Friday evening, Victoria called from the road. "I'm 2 hours out. Text me your address again." "You're really driving up tonight? It's late." "I promised I'd visit. I keep my promises." She arrived at 8:47 p.m., looking exhausted from work week and drive but smiling when Garrett opened the door. He pulled her inside, kissing her properly for the first time in 6 days, feeling tension dissolve with physical contact. "This is your place?" Victoria surveyed the apartment with critical eye. "It's very beige. Corporate housing. I don't think personality is encouraged." "We'll fix that." She dropped her overnight bag, all business now. "Show me around. I want to see where you're working." They drove to the development site in darkness, just enough moonlight to outline skeletal frames of buildings in various completion stages. Garrett walked her through the project layout, explaining the construction timeline and challenges. Problematic soil conditions, zoning restrictions that required engineering creativity, contractor coordination issues that were his primary responsibility to resolve. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking informed questions that demonstrated her technical knowledge extended beyond financial spreadsheets. She'd built buildings before running companies, understood the physical reality beneath architectural renderings. "This is good project. Solid foundation work required." She smiled at the pun, then turned serious. "You're going to do well here, Garrett. I can see it." "Doesn't feel real yet. I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong in management. Imposter syndrome is universal. Even CEOs feel it." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You've earned this position. Don't let doubt undermine that." They returned to his apartment and fell into bed together, exhaustion trumping desire but intimacy present in the simple fact of shared space. Victoria fit against him like missing piece, her breathing evening out into sleep within minutes. Garrett stayed awake longer, feeling the weight of her presence, the impossible reality that she'd driven 4 hours after full workday just to keep promise. Morning brought Harper's arrival, Clayton delivering her at 9 a.m. with duffel bag and favorite stuffed animals. Harper's face lit up seeing Victoria, launching herself into a hug with unself-conscious enthusiasm. "You're here! Daddy said you might not make it." "I promised, didn't I?" Victoria caught Garrett's eye over Harper's head, expression soft. "I always keep promises to important people." They spent the day deliberately normal, grocery shopping at local supermarket, cooking breakfast together, exploring the small town that would be temporary home. Harper pointed out parks and ice cream shops, already mapping territory with 7-year-old strategic thinking. Victoria engaged completely, asking questions and offering opinions, integrating herself into their weekend rhythm as naturally as breathing. That night, after Harper was asleep, they sat on the apartment's small balcony overlooking parking lot and distant hills. Victoria leaned against Garrett, his arm around her shoulders, both quiet in the darkness. "This is hard," she said finally. "Harder than I thought it would be." "The distance?" "All of it. Driving 4 hours, knowing I have to drive back tomorrow. Missing you during the week. Fighting Sterling and Evelyn for right to keep seeing you. Sometimes I wonder if we're torturing ourselves." Garrett tightened his arm around her. "Are you sorry we're trying?" "No. Never. But I'm scared of how much it's going to hurt if this doesn't work." "Then we make it work, whatever that takes." Victoria turned to face him, eyes reflecting starlight. "I love you. I should have said it before, but it seemed too fast, too reckless. But I'm tired of careful. I love you, Garrett Mitchell. I love Harper. I love Saturday mornings and spilled juice and the way you look at me like I'm person instead of position. I love all of it." The confession stole his breath. Garrett cupped her face, thumb brushing away tears she didn't seem to realize she'd shed. "I love you too. Have since you proved yourself to Clayton, maybe before." They kissed with desperate tenderness, acknowledging fragility of what they were building, the 1,000 ways geography and careers and institutional pressure could tear them apart. But they were here now, together against odds, and that had to count for something. Harper's voice drifted from inside the apartment, sleepy and questioning. "Daddy?" They broke apart, laughing quietly at the interruption. Garrett went to check on his daughter while Victoria collected herself, wiping tears and rebuilding composure. Family life meant constant interruptions, no space for dramatic declarations to breathe. Garrett wouldn't have it any other way. 3 months transformed distance from abstract challenge into grinding reality. Garrett worked Monday through Thursday at West Ridge, 12-hour days coordinating subcontractors and managing budget overruns that seemed to multiply despite careful planning. Friday afternoons meant 4-hour drives south, arriving home exhausted but committed to maximizing weekend hours with Harper. Victoria drove north when board meetings and acquisition negotiations permitted, her visits increasingly precious and increasingly rare as Brennan Properties expanded into new markets, requiring her constant attention. Harper adjusted with the resilience of childhood, but cracks showed. Her schoolwork slipped. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that Clayton received concerned call from her teacher about distraction and emotional distance. She stopped talking about her day in detailed narratives, offering single-word responses to questions about friends or activities. The stuffed elephant that had been constant companion spent more time abandoned on her bed than clutched during sleep. Clayton reported these observations during one of Garrett's weekend visits, the two of them sitting on the old man's porch while Harper played in the backyard. "She's struggling. Won't say it directly, but I can see it. She misses you during the week, misses the routine you had." "I know. I see it too." Garrett watched his daughter push herself listlessly on the swing, movements mechanical. "But I can't quit this job. We're only 6 months in. Walking away now would torch my reputation. I'm not saying quit. I'm saying acknowledge the cost. You're building career at expense of being present for your kid's childhood. That's a trade-off with consequences. The accusation stung because it was accurate. Garrett had rationalized the sacrifice as temporary investment in long-term stability, but watching Harper's withdrawal made him question whether financial security was worth emotional damage. Rachel had been present for every milestone, every scraped knee and homework struggle. He was missing all of it, becoming weekend visitor in his own daughter's life. Victoria arrived that evening, later than planned after emergency board meeting ran long. She looked hollowed out, dark circles under expertly applied makeup doing little to hide exhaustion. Evelyn Whitmore had launched new campaign questioning Victoria's judgment on major acquisition, using missed deadlines and cost overruns as evidence of distracted leadership. Malcolm Sterling hadn't openly sided with Whitmore yet, but his support was eroding. I'm losing control of my own company. Victoria sat at Garrett's small kitchen table, hands wrapped around coffee she wasn't drinking. Every decision gets second-guessed. Every mistake gets magnified. Evelyn's building coalition to force me out, and I'm too spread thin to fight effectively. What can I do? Nothing. That's the problem. This is my battle, and I have to win it myself. She finally met his eyes, expression raw. But Garrett, I'm exhausted. The drive up here takes 4 hours. I lose entire days to traveling, and when I get here we have 48 hours before I have to leave again. It's not enough time to feel like we're actually together. Are you saying we should end this? I'm saying I don't know how to keep doing this. The distance, the pressure, Harper struggling, we're all suffering and I can't see the end point. Victoria's voice cracked. I love you. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't solve logistics. The conversation that followed treaded familiar ground, possible solutions that all required impossible sacrifices. Victoria couldn't relocate. Her company demanded constant presence. Garrett couldn't quit without destroying career prospects. Harper needed stability that neither adult could currently provide. They circled the same problems without finding exits, exhaustion making everything feel more insurmountable. That night, they made love with desperate urgency, seeking connection through physical intensity that temporarily overrode emotional uncertainty. Afterwards, lying tangled in sheets with Victoria's head on his chest, Garrett felt the fragility of what they'd built. 3 months of weekend visits and daily phone calls, snatched moments between obligations, love declared but never quite tested beyond words. Victoria left Sunday afternoon, the goodbye lasting longer than usual, both of them clinging like they sensed fracture lines spreading. Harper watched from the window, face pressed against glass, not waving when Victoria's car pulled away. The structural problem emerged on a Tuesday morning during routine inspection. One of the subcontractors had poured foundation for the commercial building's north wing without proper drainage specification, creating conditions that would lead to catastrophic water damage within years. Garrett discovered it during walkthrough, recognizing immediately the scope of disaster they'd narrowly avoided. He called emergency meeting with engineering team and Hayes Construction's regional manager, a man named Thomas Brennan, no relation to Victoria despite shared surname, who'd been skeptical about Garrett's promotion from the beginning. Thomas was 56, old-school construction politics, believed management positions should go to guys who'd spent decades climbing the ladder rather than someone who'd gotten lucky with connections. The conference room at the site office was cramped and overheated, tension thick enough to choke on. Garrett laid out the problem with engineering drawings marked in red, explaining why the foundation needed complete tear-out and re-pour, 3 weeks delay minimum, substantial budget impact, potential legal liability if they proceeded with flawed work. Thomas Brennan's face flushed progressively redder as Garrett talked. You're telling me we need to eat 3 weeks and $200,000 in costs because of drainage specs? I'm telling you, the foundation is compromised. If we don't fix it now, we're looking at structural failure and lawsuits down the line. Or you're being overly cautious because you're sleeping with a CEO and think you can afford expensive mistakes. Thomas leaned forward, voice dropping to menacing register. Let me be clear, Mitchell. I didn't want you on this project. You got here through connections, not merit. Now you're making calls that blow our budget and timeline based on what? Perfectionism? Paranoia? The engineering team shifted uncomfortably. Garrett kept his expression neutral despite fury burning in his chest. This isn't about perfectionism. The drainage spec was explicit in original plans. The subcontractor deviated without approval. That's code violation and structural risk. So we slap their wrist and move forward. We're not tearing out a foundation that's already poured. Then I'm documenting my objection formally. When this building develops water damage, the liability falls on whoever signed off on defective work. Garrett's voice stayed level through force of will. I won't put my name on something I know is wrong. The standoff lasted 5 brutal seconds. Thomas finally broke eye contact, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Fine. Document your objection. But I'm overriding your recommendation. We proceed as planned. Garrett left the meeting knowing he'd been outmaneuvered. Thomas had authority to override project manager on budget decisions, and challenging him further would mean escalating to corporate leadership. A fight Garrett would likely lose given Thomas's 3 decades with the company versus his 6 months in management. The smart play was letting it go, protecting his position by demonstrating flexibility rather than stubborn idealism. The ethical play was refusing to compromise on structural integrity regardless of career cost. He spent the afternoon documenting everything: the original specifications, the deviation, his recommendation, Thomas's override. Created paper trail that would protect him legally if the building failed, even though it would probably also mark him as difficult to work with, unwilling to be team player when budget realities demanded compromise. That evening, he called Victoria, needing to talk through the situation with someone who understood both construction reality and corporate politics. She listened without interrupting, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her technical background. Thomas is wrong, she said after he'd laid out the full situation, structurally and legally. If that foundation fails, Hayes Construction faces lawsuits that could sink them. He's prioritizing short-term budget over long-term liability. But he's my boss. Going over his head marks me as insubordinate. And letting it go makes you complicit in work you know is defective. Victoria was quiet for a moment, thinking. You have to stand your ground, Garrett. I know it risks your position, but this is exactly the kind of integrity that made me fall in love with you. Don't compromise it for job security. Easy for you to say. You're CEO. I'm 6 months into management with kid to support. The snap in his voice surprised them both. Victoria's silence stretched heavy with hurt before she responded, tone carefully controlled. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm projecting my situation onto yours without acknowledging the difference in our positions. Do what you think is right for you and Harper. They ended the call without resolution, tension replacing the connection they usually found in evening conversations. Garrett sat alone in his generic apartment, staring at documentation he'd compiled, trying to calculate the cost of integrity versus the cost of compromise. At 11:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with text from Victoria. I stand by what I said. You're the man I love because you do the right thing even when it's hard. Whatever you decide, I support you. But please don't become someone who accepts corruption just to keep his job. The world needs people like you. The message crystallized his decision. He called Thomas Brennan's boss first thing Wednesday morning, requesting formal review of the foundation issue. Explained the structural concerns, the code violations, the long-term liability. The conversation was professional and terrifying, knowing he was ending his project manager tenure even as he made the case for doing right thing. Hayes Construction's VP of Operations flew in Friday to inspect the foundation personally. Brought independent engineering consultant who confirmed Garrett's assessment within 30 minutes. By end of day, company had decided to tear out the compromised foundation, eat the costs, and discipline the subcontractor who deviated from specs. Thomas Brennan was reassigned to different project. Garrett kept his position but gained reputation as someone unwilling to compromise, which was asset and liability depending on who was evaluating. Victoria called that evening, voice carrying pride he could hear through phone speaker. "You did it. You stood up for what was right. Cost me any goodwill I'd built with regional management. They think I'm difficult now. They think you have standards. That's different." She paused, then added softly, "I'm proud of you. For what it's worth." It's worth everything. The foundation got re-poured correctly, 3 weeks behind schedule but structurally sound. Garrett watched the concrete trucks and rebar placement with satisfaction that had nothing to do with career advancement. He'd protected future residents from developers' corner cutting, upheld principles his father had taught him about craftsmanship and integrity. Sometimes doing right thing didn't advance your position, but it let you sleep at night. Harper's 8th birthday fell on a Tuesday in March, school day that Garrett couldn't take off without missing critical concrete pour. He'd planned celebration for the coming weekend, party with friends at Clayton's house, cake and presents, and all the ritual that made birthdays special. But being absent on the actual day felt like failure. One more milestone he was missing while building career supposed to provide better life. He called during Harper's breakfast, Clayton holding phone so she could talk while eating cereal. His daughter's voice sounded small and distant, not quite masking disappointment. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I can't be there today." "It's okay, Daddy. Grandpa's making me pancakes after school." "I know it's not the same, but this weekend we'll have big party with all your friends. Victoria's coming too." "Is she?" Genuine surprise lifted Harper's voice. "She didn't come last time." The accusation was unintentional but accurate. Victoria had missed the previous weekend due to acquisition negotiations, and the one before that because Sterling had demanded emergency board meeting. Their visits had become increasingly sporadic, the distance and competing obligations grinding against best intentions. "She promised she'll be there for your party. Wouldn't miss it." After the call ended, Garrett sat in his truck outside the construction site, phone still in hand, trying to remember when he'd last felt like competent parent rather than absent figure managing logistics from distance. Rachel had made parenting look natural, the daily presence, the intuitive responses to Harper's needs, the thousands of small moments that built security and connection. He was providing financial stability while failing at emotional availability. His phone buzzed with text from Victoria. "On my way to Harper's school with birthday cupcakes. Don't worry, I got permission from teacher yesterday. Your daughter won't feel forgotten on her actual birthday." The gesture hit him with unexpected force. Victoria taking initiative he hadn't thought to coordinate, showing up for Harper when he physically couldn't. This was what partnership looked like, two people covering each other's gaps, providing consistency despite distance and complications. He texted back, "Thank you. That means everything." Victoria's response came 5 minutes later. "She's my family too. I take care of family." The casual declaration, "my family," represented commitment beyond romantic relationship, acknowledgement that their connection included Harper as central figure rather than complication to navigate. Victoria hadn't signed up for instant motherhood when she'd approached him in that restaurant 7 months ago, but she'd embraced it anyway, showing up for school events and soccer games, learning Harper's preferences and fears, building relationship that transcended obligation. That weekend's birthday party proved Victoria's dedication. She arrived Friday evening with trunk full of decorations, taking over Clayton's house with streamers and balloons, coordinating with precision that came from running major corporation. She'd researched Harper's current interests, marine biology after-school unit on ocean ecosystems, and transformed the party into underwater theme complete with fish-shaped cookies and educational games about marine life. Harper's face when she walked into decorated space was pure joy, the withdrawal and sadness that had marked recent months temporarily erased by celebration and attention. 15 kids from her class descended with chaotic energy, playing games Victoria had organized, eating cake Clayton had baked under her supervision, shrieking with laughter that filled the house like music. Garrett watched Victoria navigate the chaos with competence that shouldn't have surprised him but did, corralling rowdy 8-year-olds, diffusing conflicts over game rules, ensuring quieter kids didn't get overwhelmed by louder personalities. She'd clearly studied childhood development, prepared herself for this role with same thoroughness she brought to business negotiations. During brief lull while kids were occupied with craft project, Garrett found her in Clayton's kitchen refilling juice boxes. He wrapped arms around her from behind, pressing kiss to her temple. "You're incredible. You know that? I just want Harper to feel special. She deserves that. You've been researching parenting, haven't you? The activity choices, the way you're managing group dynamics, that's not accidental." Victoria turned in his arms, expression vulnerable beneath usual confidence. "I bought 7 books about child development and co-parenting, watched probably 40 hours of parenting seminars online. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying to learn." The confession melted something in Garrett's chest. This woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals had spent her limited free time studying how to be better presence in his daughter's life. That was love. Not the romantic declaration kind, but the daily choice to show up and do work required for relationship to function. "You're doing great. Harper adores you. I adore her. And you." Victoria's eyes held his, serious now. "Garrett, I know the distance is hard. I know I've missed weekends and left you managing alone, but I want you to know I'm committed. To both of you. This isn't casual for me." "It's not casual for me either, but Victoria, I need to know, where does this end? What's the end game? We can't do long distance forever. At some point we need plan beyond surviving week to week." The question they'd been avoiding crystallized between them. 7 months in, and they still hadn't discussed future beyond next weekend, next month, maintaining holding pattern without addressing whether they were building towards something permanent or just prolonging inevitable ending. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but Harper crashed into the kitchen trailing 3 friends, demanding Victoria's help with craft project that had gone wrong. The moment dissolved into child logistics, serious conversation deferred once again. But that night, after party was cleaned up and Harper was asleep in her room at Clayton's, Victoria and Garrett sat on the porch steps under star-filled sky. She leaned against him, both tired and content, easier with physical proximity than difficult conversations. "About what you asked earlier. The end game." Victoria's voice was quiet, almost lost in night sounds. "I've been thinking about it constantly. My lease on the penthouse is up in 4 months. I could relocate. Not completely. I'd still need to be in the city for board meetings and major negotiations, but I could base myself here. Get placed closer to West Ridge. Be more present." Garrett's heart hammered against ribs. "That's huge change. Your whole life is in the city. My company is in the city. My life is becoming wherever you and Harper are." She shifted to face him directly. "I'm not saying it would be easy. Sterling would probably use it as ammunition, claim I'm abandoning company responsibilities. But Bradley's proven himself capable as COO. The board trusts him. I could transition to more strategic role, less day-to-day presence required." "Victoria, I can't ask you to give up what you've built." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Because the alternative is this: snatched weekends and missed calls and constantly feeling like I'm failing at both career and relationship. Something has to change or we're going to break under the pressure." The truth of her assessment was undeniable. They'd been running on fumes for months, exhaustion and distance eroding the foundation they'd tried to build. Without fundamental change, the relationship would eventually collapse, despite best intentions. What about Harper's school? She's finally settled with Clayton. Moving her again seems cruel. I'm not suggesting she moves, just that I'm closer for weekends and emergencies, still respecting your custody arrangement but being more accessible. Victoria took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Garrett, I'm trying to find a solution that doesn't require anyone to sacrifice everything. Maybe that's naive, but I have to try. The vulnerability in her admission, the acknowledgement that she didn't have perfect answer but was willing to restructure her entire life to find workable compromise, demonstrated commitment beyond romantic gestures. This was pragmatic love, the kind built on logistics and sacrifice rather than just feeling. Let me think about it. Talk to Harper, see how she feels about you being around more consistently. This affects her as much as us. Of course. Take whatever time you need. They sat in companionable silence, watching stars wheel overhead, both aware they'd reached inflection point. The next decisions would determine whether this relationship survived or became cautionary tale about good intentions defeated by practical reality. The crisis arrived via 2 a.m. phone call 3 weeks later. Garrett's phone erupted with Victoria's ringtone, jarring him from sleep. Her voice came through frantic and fractured, barely coherent through tears. He's pulling all funding. Sterling. Emergency board vote tomorrow. Evelyn convinced him I'm compromising company integrity. They're removing me as CEO. 24 hours notice. Garrett sat up, mind struggling through sleep fog to process catastrophe. What happened? What triggered this? Missed acquisition deadline. The Portland development deal fell through because I wasn't available for final negotiations. I was at Harper's school play. Evelyn framed it as choosing personal life over company responsibilities. Sterling agreed. They've lined up votes to remove me. The school play had been Thursday evening, elaborate production of The Little Mermaid where Harper played enthusiastic background fish. Victoria had driven up specifically for it, missing critical business meeting to sit in elementary school auditorium watching 7-year-olds sing off-key. Garrett had been grateful for her presence, Harper glowing with pride to have both adults who mattered watching her perform. That choice was now costing Victoria her company. There has to be legal recourse. They can't just fire you without cause. They have cause. Documented pattern of missed deadlines and strategic decisions affected by personal distractions. Evelyn's been building case for months. She finally has enough ammunition. Victoria's breathing was ragged, hovering near hyperventilation. Garrett, I'm losing everything I built. 10 years of work, gone because I chose to watch Harper be a fish in a school play. The devastation in her voice cracked something fundamental in Garrett's chest. She'd known the risks, chosen love over career security anyway, and now faced consequence he'd always feared would destroy them. I'll drive down tonight. We'll figure this out together. There's nothing to figure out. The vote happens at 9 a.m. I don't have the numbers to stop it. Her voice steadied slightly, moving from panic to grim acceptance. I need you to know this isn't your fault, or Harper's. I made choice with full awareness of potential cost. I don't regret it. Victoria, I have to go. Need to prepare for tomorrow. Salvage what dignity I can from this disaster. I'll call you after the vote. She disconnected before he could argue further. Garrett sat in darkness of his apartment, phone still pressed to ear, feeling like he'd been gutted. Victoria was losing her life's work because she'd tried to build relationship with him, because she'd shown up for a child's school play instead of closing business deal worth millions. This was his fault regardless of what she claimed. He'd let her invest in relationship that demanded too much, cost too much, destroyed too much. He called Clayton, waking the old man at 2:17 a.m. I need you to take Harper tomorrow. Don't know how long. I have to go to the city. Clayton's voice came through sleep gravelly but alert. What happened? Victoria's losing her company. Emergency board meeting. I need to be there. Go. Harper will be fine. You take care of your woman. Garrett threw clothes in duffel bag, grabbed truck keys, was on the road by 2:30 a.m. The drive south through darkness gave him too much time to think, to catalog all the ways their relationship had been doomed from inception, to acknowledge that love didn't actually conquer institutional resistance, or class boundaries, or fundamental incompatibility of worlds. He reached the city at 6:45 a.m., drove directly to Brennan Properties headquarters. The building was already active, early shift employees filtering through lobby, probably aware of impending corporate drama. Garrett found Victoria in her corner office, still wearing previous day's clothes, face haggard with exhaustion and defeat. She looked up when he entered, surprise flickering across features. "What are you doing here?" "Being present. That's what you do when someone you love is facing crisis." "Garrett, you didn't have to drive all night." "Yes, I did." He crossed the office, pulling her into embrace she initially resisted before collapsing against him. "Whatever happens in that board meeting, you're not facing it alone." They stood wrapped together while dawn light crept across the city, neither speaking, both aware that next few hours would determine whether their relationship survived this final test or became collateral damage in corporate warfare. At 8:30 a.m., Bradley Walsh arrived, looking grim. "I called emergency meeting of department heads. We're all prepared to resign if Victoria's removed without cause. Evelyn can have her coup, but she'll be inheriting empty company." Victoria pulled back from Garrett, wiping tears. "Bradley, you can't. Your family depends on this job. Some things are worth more than job security. Loyalty, integrity, not letting bullies win." Bradley's expression was resolute. "You built this company into something worth being proud of. We're not abandoning you now." Other executives began arriving. Heads of operations, development, legal, finance. 12 people who represented backbone of Brennan Properties' success, all declaring they'd walk if Victoria was forced out. The show of solidarity was staggering and possibly suicidal. Dozen careers potentially destroyed by standing on principle against power and money. At 8:55 a.m., Victoria walked into the boardroom with Garrett beside her, both knowing this was likely end of everything they'd built separately and together. The board members were already assembled, Evelyn Whitmore wearing expression of smug victory, Malcolm Sterling neutral and assessing, others looking uncomfortable with drama about to unfold. Victoria didn't sit. She stood at head of conference table, voice steady despite exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "I understand there's motion to remove me as CEO. Before you vote, I have statement." Evelyn's smile sharpened. "That's not necessary, Victoria. The decision has been made." "Then you can listen to my statement first." Victoria's voice carried authority that had built company, that wouldn't surrender without fight. "You're right that I've made personal life priority recently. Missed meetings, adjusted schedule, been less available than previous years. That's true and documented. What's also true is this company's performance. Revenue is up 42% year over year. We've closed 3 major acquisitions. We're ahead on every development timeline. Profit margins exceed industry average by 18%. Those are facts." She pulled out tablet, displaying metrics that contradicted narrative of distracted leadership. "What you're actually objecting to isn't performance. It's the fact that I'm dating working-class man and prioritizing relationship that doesn't fit your social expectations. You're removing me because I chose love over maintaining appropriate CEO image. That's not business decision, it's prejudice." Malcolm Sterling shifted in his seat, first sign of discomfort. Evelyn's smile faltered fractionally. Victoria pressed advantage. "If you vote to remove me, you'll lose me. But you'll also lose Bradley Walsh, who runs daily operations, Jennifer Cross, who manages investor relations, Robert Martinez, who heads development, Marcus Thompson from legal, Sarah Kim from finance. She listed 12 names, watching comprehension dawn across board members' faces. They've all committed to resign if I'm forced out. You'll be inheriting companies stripped of institutional knowledge and leadership that makes it function. Stock price will tank. Investors will flee. You'll have your symbolic victory and worthless company. The silence was absolute. Evelyn's face flushed red with fury at having her play countered so completely. Sterling looked thoughtful, recalculating costs versus benefits. Additionally, Victoria continued, voice dropping to quiet intensity, I've received acquisition offer from Riverside Development Corporation. They're interested in purchasing Brennan Properties for 15% premium over current valuation. I've been declining because this company is my legacy. But if you force me out, I'll recommend board accept that offer. You'll get your payout and lose any influence over company's future direction. Or, she paused for emphasis, you can acknowledge that personal life choices don't compromise professional competence. Allow me to continue as CEO with clear understanding that I'll maintain performance standards while also maintaining human relationships. Your choice. The power play was stunning in its execution. Victoria simultaneously defending herself and threatening mutually assured destruction if board proceeded with removal. Garrett watched from doorway, pride and terror mingling as she fought for life she'd built. Malcolm Sterling spoke first, his voice measured. Those are compelling arguments, Victoria. However, they don't address fundamental concern about judgment and priorities. Then let me address that directly. Victoria's gaze swept across every board member. I've spent 10 years proving I'm a capable leader. Sacrificed personal life, relationships, any semblance of balance to build this company. I became exactly what my father was, successful and empty. Then I met someone who reminded me that achievement without human connection is just elaborate suicide. I started prioritizing both, career and relationship. And guess what? Company still thrives. Turns out having personal life doesn't make me incompetent. It makes me human. She let the words settle before delivering final argument. You can remove me. Take your chances with gutted leadership and acquisition offer, or you can evolve. Recognize that CEOs can be whole people with careers and relationships and families. Make Brennan Properties company that values outcomes over optics. I've already proven I can deliver both. Question is whether you're brave enough to let me. The board members exchanged glances, silent communication flowing between them. Evelyn looked murderous but outmaneuvered. Sterling's expression shifted from hostile to considering. The vote, when it came, was closer than Victoria had feared, 7-3 in favor of maintaining her position, with Sterling casting deciding vote. Motion fails. Victoria remains as CEO contingent on sustained performance. Sterling's voice carried warning. But understand this isn't carte blanche. We'll be watching closely. Victoria's relief was visible but controlled. Understood. Thank you. The boardroom cleared slowly, Evelyn departing without word, shooting venomous glare at Victoria. Other members offered subdued congratulations or neutral acknowledgement. Garrett waited until they were alone before approaching. Pulling her into embrace, she returned with desperate intensity. You did it. You actually won. For now. Sterling will be looking for excuse to revisit this decision. Victoria's voice was muffled against his shoulder. But I bought time. Proved I won't go quietly. You were magnificent. Terrifying and magnificent. They stood wrapped together in boardroom that had nearly been site of her professional execution, both shaking with adrenaline crash. The victory felt fragile, temporary reprieve rather than permanent solution. But they'd survived another crisis, another test of whether their connection could withstand institutional pressure designed to force separation. Victoria's phone buzzed with text. She pulled back to check it, smile breaking across exhausted features. Harper. Clayton sent her photo of fish costume from the play, asking if I have copies of pictures I took. The mundane request amid corporate warfare crystallized everything they were fighting for. Not just romance or career, but actual family, daily life built from school plays and weekend visits and choosing each other despite obstacles. "Let's get out of here," Garrett said. "Go somewhere we can breathe." They left Brennan Properties headquarters hand in hand, walking into morning sunlight that felt like absolution. The proposal happened 3 weeks later, not in restaurant where they'd met or at some romantic destination, but at the West Ridge construction site during Harper's weekend visit. Garrett had planned something elaborate, rehearsed speech and perfect moment, but life intervened with its usual disregard for scripts. Harper was exploring the development site, fascinated by construction equipment and skeletal building frames. Victoria walked beside her, explaining architectural concepts in terms 8-year-old could grasp, pointing out load-bearing walls and foundation work. Garrett watched them together, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt certainty crystallize into action. He had Rachel's grandmother's ring in his truck, had been carrying it for months, waiting for right moment. Right moment didn't exist. There was only now. Messy and imperfect, and exactly what their relationship had always been. "Harper, can you come here for a minute?" His daughter skipped over, curious. Victoria followed more slowly, sensing something significant in Garrett's tone. He knelt in construction dust, pulling the small box from his pocket. Harper's eyes went wide. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. "Victoria Brennan, I'm not good with speeches. I build things with my hands, solve problems with concrete and steel. But you've taught me that some things can't be engineered. Love doesn't follow blueprints. Family doesn't wait for perfect conditions." He opened the vintage ring catching sunlight. "We've survived distance and doubt, board meetings and foundation pours, every obstacle that tried to convince us we were impossible. I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live. With you. Building something permanent that starts with this moment and extends as far as we're willing to work for it." Victoria was crying, nodding before he could finish. Harper bounced on her toes, vibrating with excitement. This was Rachel's grandmother's ring. She wanted it passed to someone worthy of continuing family forward. "Harper and we'd be honored if you'd join our family officially. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out choked with emotion. "Yes, absolutely, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, stood to kiss her properly, while Harper cheered and danced around them. Construction workers on nearby scaffolding whistled and applauded, having witnessed the proposal from distance. Victoria pulled back, laughing and crying simultaneously. That was the least romantic proposal location possible. "We're not a romantic couple. We're a practical one that chose each other anyway." "True." She kissed him again, then knelt to include Harper in embrace. "We're really doing this? Becoming official family?" Harper threw her arms around both adults. "Finally! I've been waiting forever." The three of them stood together on dusty construction site, building beginning rather than ending. Foundation poured and setting strong. There would be more obstacles. Victoria's board, logistics of combining households, inevitable conflicts that came with blending lives. But they'd proven they could weather storms, fight when necessary, compromise when possible, and most importantly, choose each other, despite every rational argument against it. Clayton arrived to pick up Harper that evening, found them still at construction site planning wedding logistics between equipment inspections. The old man's weathered face split into rare, genuine smile. "Congratulations. Rachel would be proud." He pulled Garrett aside while Victoria and Harper discussed potential venues. "You found something worth fighting for. Don't let go of it." "I won't. I promise." "Good, because love like that doesn't come along twice." The wedding took place 4 months later at Clayton's house. Intimate ceremony on the same porch where they'd had countless difficult conversations about distance and sacrifice. 50 guests, construction workers and executives, Harper's school friends, and Victoria's remaining board allies, the assembled witnesses to relationship that had defied probability through stubborn commitment. Harper served as junior bridesmaid, taking role with utmost seriousness. Clayton walked Victoria down makeshift aisle, having earned that honor through unwavering support and blessing when it mattered most. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt, officiated by Russell Hayes, who'd proven surprisingly sentimental beneath gruff construction site exterior. Garrett's vows were simple. "I promise to build with you, not just buildings, but life that honors where we came from while reaching toward where we're going. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." Victoria's response trembled with emotion. "I promise to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. To remember that success isn't measured in quarterly reports, but in moments like this. To love you and Harper with everything I am, not just what's convenient." Harper contributed her own promise, unprompted and sincere. "I promise to be good daughter to both of you, and to remember we're family no matter what." The reception was potluck affair, elegant and working-class elements mingling naturally, champagne toasts alongside beer coolers, catered hors d'oeuvres next to Clayton's famous ribs. Derek Sullivan showed up with his wife, offering genuine congratulations and admitting he'd been wrong about everything. Bradley Walsh gave toast celebrating Victoria's courage to live fully rather than safely. Evelyn Whitmore didn't attend, but her absence was blessing rather than slight. As sun set over suburban neighborhood, Garrett and Victoria swayed together on improvised dance floor, Harper tucked between them, all three moving to music that felt like benediction. They'd survived distance and institutional resistance, board meetings and foundation pours, every test thrown at relationship that shouldn't have worked. They'd built something permanent anyway, not through perfect planning, but through stubborn commitment to choosing each other when easier path would have been walking away. Construction was Garrett's specialty, taking raw materials and creating structures that would stand for generations. This family was his masterwork, cobbled from unlikely elements and held together by mortar of daily choice rather than romance or fate. Victoria's head rested on his shoulder, her voice quiet beneath music. "No regrets?" "Not one." "You?" "Only that I waited so long to ask you out in that restaurant. Could have had extra months together. We have the rest of our lives now. That's enough time to build something beautiful." Harper squeezed between them, content and secure in family that had fought for itself. The construction site that had been their courtship, the board meetings that had tested commitment, the 4-hour drives and weekend visits, all of it had led here, to this moment, to three people who'd chosen each other against odds. The party continued into evening, laughter and conversation flowing naturally, barriers of class and background dissolved by shared celebration. Garrett caught Clayton's eye across the yard, saw approval and something like peace in the old man's expression. Rachel's ghost had been laid to rest not through forgetting, but through honoring, building new family that respected past without being imprisoned by it. Later, when guests had departed and Harper was asleep in Clayton's guest room, Garrett and Victoria stood on the porch under stars, married and exhausted and complete. Victoria's ring caught moonlight, symbol of permanent commitment that had survived every attempt to break it. "What happens next?" she asked, leaning into him. "We figure it out. Day by day, choice by choice, Same way we've done everything. That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan that's worked so far. She laughed, the sound carrying across quiet neighborhood, joy distilled into pure expression. They'd survived the unsurvivable, built the impossible, loved when logic advised against it. That was their foundation. Not perfect blueprints, but messy commitment to showing up and doing work required for relationship to stand. The construction of family was never finished, always requiring maintenance and adjustment and daily choice to keep building rather than letting entropy win. But they'd proven themselves capable of that work, willing to sacrifice convenience for connection, status for substance, certainty for love. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.